Have you hit record yet?
I am recording. It's 5:05, and we are doing a live taping, which is weird because we don't ever do this.
But we're hoping this is the first in a series of live tapings from the Clough Lounge here in the lovely Clough Undergraduate Learning Commons. Is that correct? It's a mouthful.
Just don't call it the Culk. That's the problem.
We can call it the Clough, right? All right, and thanks to Kelly and Wesley, who are our Center for Academic Enrichment student intern folks who are here just because they felt sorry for us. We do appreciate that.
Okay, I need you to back off from the mic or drop your gain a little bit.
Look, you don't know me well enough to ask me to do that.
All right,
I can back up from the mic.
After a few podcasts, I know you pretty well. Okay.
All right, I think that's good. Why can't you call it the Culk? Is that like dirty? Is that illegal in the state of Georgia?
I'll tell you after we start the show.
Okay, but
you ready?
So we're hoping this is the first in a series of live podcasts here from the Clough Lounge here at Georgia Tech. Today's topic.
Wait, I'm going to start the show.
But I figured if nobody's here, why even do the thing?
Consilience
With Pete and Charlie. I'm Pete.
I'm Charlie. The unity of knowledge.
That and a whole bunch of caffeine is what's going to get us through this.
Now it feels like we're doing the podcast.
Yeah, but shouldn't you have held for edit so you can actually edit that in correctly?
So why shouldn't we call it the Culk? That's a really good question. The powers that be did say that they don't want it to be called the Culk.
Oh, you mean they commented on what you should call it as well?
It's the Clough Undergraduate Learning Commons, also known as the Clough.
Right,
And,
but why not the Culk?
It sounds weird, doesn't it?
It sounds dirty.
Hey, why don't you say hello to those folks who just came in?
Hi, thanks for coming. And you'll give it 5 minutes, then you'll really regret it. No, I think the reason they don't like to call the Culk is because now you're pointing at me. You're moving your hand around.
Turn yourself down.
Okay.
You're getting into it, and this live sound check thing is giving me.
If we were in the
fits.
WRK studios, he'd be fondling my microphone as we speak, and that really drives me nuts.
I'd be moving things around, and I'd be fixing things. Okay, so.
You want the answer? It's a bad acronym.
It doesn't
Culk.
sound right?
Sounds like something some physician with a specialty does to you with a large metal implement.
The thing is, though, CULC is the abbreviation that landed in the Oscar, in the course catalog.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it was designated. And so from that moment on, this building has always been the Culk for students. We tried a campaign to make it the Clough or the Clough Commons, and people kept calling it Culk and calling it Culk.
No, the students call it Clough. We have students here. Don't you guys call it the Clough? Kelly, you call it the Culk?
Yeah, that's
right.
right.
I thought only old people like me called it the Culk.
You should listen to the guy who talks to the students.
I talk to students.
Me.
I teach students. What do you...
So even trying to get it to be called the Clough, students used that designation, the building designation, Culk, to decide what to call it.
But you could simply change it by mandate, the way the National Science Foundation did when somebody talked about science, mathematics, engineering, technology, and called it SMET. Until somebody wrote an article at the National Science Foundation and said, I think STEM sounds better. Because think about it, now the new acronym is STEM to STEAM. They want to include arts in there as well. So that would be SMET to SMEET. That's... You're touching my microphone again.
You're too loud, man.
All right, I'm sorry.
You're far too loud.
All right, but as we mentioned before, this is the first in what we hope is a series of podcasts recorded here live in the Clough Lounge. And today's topic is...
freshmen and their issues.
I was going to say hire old people. They're fun to watch.
You're recycling jokes now.
No, because I had an experience as I was going out fetching you some water like some sort of domestic servant.
I still appreciate it.
All right, you're welcome. I was trying to get in the door, and I don't know. Everything's done on RFID tags. Are you touching me again? Right? Proximity sensors, I guess, is what they'd call them. All right, I can just move farther away.
No, you always lean in.
All right. And how many people in the room, when they open the door to their dorm, their building, try to open it with their ass? Am I the only one that does that? You know, you got your wallet in your back pocket, and you sort of lean up there, and you kind of do the thing. And I thought, okay, I'm not so old, I can't do that anymore. So I tried doing that to the entry door, just a little ways down there. And I'm trying it, I'm looking like an idiot. I'm almost falling over, and people are asking me, sir, do you need some help? And then I realized my buzz card was in my hand.
Yeah, it's always in it's the pocket of my shirt. And so I'm bumping up against the RFID thing until I realize, oh no, it's in my pocket.
So you look like a deer in rutting season or something? You're like rubbing up against the tree or something?
I don't know what kind of deer you've been seeing, but I don't think they're deer.
Oh, okay. But don't they scrape the moss off their antlers or something?
Why are you talking about RFID and your butt?
Good question. No, because this is a little tough for us. We have an audience. I mean, normally we do this in the confines of the WREK studios where Charlie doesn't grab buttons. We have a microphone, actually. Actually, do we have any freshmen among us? So, all right, so take some time,
sold
relax.
out by her friend.
So later we have got a microphone right in front of you. So if later you're feeling comfortable, or I should say not too uncomfortable, and you got a question or comment for us, but actually even our upperclassmen, you guys remember what it's like to be a freshman more than Charlie and I do.
Because I was a freshman about 5 years ago. No, not 5 years ago. I got the number wrong. Do you want to start with our freshman experiences? Would that be?
Why do we do that, Charlie? Please begin.
My father likes to tell a story about when he dropped me off for Facet. I'm an out-of-state student. Was an out-of-state student.
And he went to Georgia Tech.
I did.
Got 2 degrees here after he realized what he really wanted to do.
Whose story is this?
Please proceed.
So my parents dropped me off a week before classes started. The Facet, which happens like the out-of-state Facet, you move in and then you do the orientation. They take you to a football game. This was 22 years ago, so it might be different now. And my father likes to say, right before he left the dorm room, he looked at me and said, "So, where are you going to eat tonight?" And I said, "I have no idea." I remember it as, I have no idea. The whole world is in front of me. I could do anything I wanted. He remembers it as me saying, "I don't know." So that is what I think of when I think of the freshman experience. It is being seen by parents and adults in one way and by the freshmen themselves in another way. And I think that's the tension that we're trying to relax, right? Why are you looking at me like that?
Okay, I'm just thinking, right? So for the people,
Think faster.
So for people that are watching this interesting phenomenon, we try to let this evolve as an organic experience. So when we're done, we'll have some result of an improvisational, innovational kind of thing where we may come to a conclusion we hadn't previously, which is why we do minimal show prep. Is that our philosophy?
Minimal means zero?
No, there's more than that. You pointed out in our podcast, 2 weeks ago, that we've been preparing for this our entire lives since we've been freshmen. I just remember going to sleep in my dorm at the University of Illinois for the first time after my parents dropped me off with my roommate, realizing we're on our own. And there was no freshman experience. There was no GT 1000. There was no residence life.
You're saying things with capital letters, freshman experience.
Yes.
Because there was a freshman experience. You were having it.
Right. There was no freshman experience program like we have here at Georgia Tech. But you used Facet before and didn't. It could have been, multifaceted.
I will give you all the money in my wallet if you can say right now what Facet stands for.
I can't. I know the E is environs, and that confuses me enough, so I won't even try. All right. Does anyone remember what does Facet stand for?
Freshman adaptation to the situations and environs of tech.
So freshman adaptations to the situations and environs at Tech.
Yeah. I'm going to show you.
Who came up with that acronym? Oh, as the surroundings?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Right. So we need a panel from the audience just to figure that one out.
I'm going to show you how much money you didn't get from me.
Oh.
That's what you could have had
So
if you had been able to.
$11.
That's right. That's right.
But
That's
I
what you
admitted
missed out on.
I couldn't do it. No, I just remember feeling all alone that you're actually on your own. And it was
Hold for edit.
So you're giving up and putting the spit screen.
Yeah, you
out for me?
I need everything to stop you from popping.
All right. Okay. I'm gonna readjust my seat.
So I said Facet, which is is jargon in a way,
Okay.
right? but everybody has one of these, right? Everyone has some kind of orientation program where you take the incoming students and you say, what?
We didn't. So when were you a freshman? 20-something years ago?
22.
So for me, it was 30-something years ago. And
No one's impressed.
Resident advisors, right? We had resident advisors back then. Resident advisors, even when you were a freshman, you're touching chords again. Knock it off. Am I getting too close? Okay. Resident advisors, their job was to say, "Hey, try not to burn the building down when I'm out." That was really
don't blow up the polymer lab.
there was no programming. There was no 4 pillars of learning outcomes like they have at Residence Life right now. There were no peer leaders, right? So if you're a freshman, are you here for the summer program?
Yeah, I'm a summer freshman.
Okay. So technically, your RA is called a PL, a peer leader. And do they take care of you and make sure?
Yeah, we had RAs when I came to school.
They tell us what's going on, and they teach us how to eat healthy and stuff like that.
So she said they have meetings where they tell them what's going on. But you're laughing hysterically as you're telling me that.
Yeah,
So
silly.
what does that mean? Wesley, should we get her up to the microphone? Just hand her the microphone. Just hand it. We're having an open discussion here. All right, so you have meetings with your peer leader.
Yeah, we have a meeting tonight to talk to us about how to move out, basically.
Because you're almost done. Is it dead week now, or is dead week
Next week is finals
we're
week.
We're moving to our fall dorms August 3rd, so we're
Okay.
basically done. Yeah.
Okay. But you're saying it while you're laughing hysterically. Are you saying there isn't value in the freshman experience peer leadership program?
Not quite during the summer. Everyone's
Okay.
kind of scattered,
Okay.
so some people don't even attend the meetings.
Okay.
And those who do make it kind of a joke. It's always funny.
So, and this is an interesting thing, and it's something we should cover, is we've changed the way college works, right? We're very hand-holdy. Is that a word? You're a library guy.
It's helicopter.
Oh, yeah. So that's how you describe parents, right? Helicopter parents are
Hovering,
the
yeah.
hovering parents. They're always all over the place.
I think there's a certain amount of hovering going on by the admin and I mean, there's so much social programming. There's so much, like, join us in this activity. There's so much be this kind of person at college that I think you could actually consider the administration to be sort of a helicopter administration.
That's a good point, but I'll deny that. If you
Oh,
say it in front of
Nirmal's
my
like, no way.
administration.
Absolutely not.
All right,
Oh,
so
I'm
we
sorry.
have
So that was a shout out
an
to,
administrator. We have
you've been mentioned on the
program
podcast several
coordinator
times, Nirmal.
extraordinaire. So thoughts on that, Nirmal? Are we not too? The
Grab-
microphone's right
grab the
next to
mic.
you. She can just hand it to you.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
So I guess I'd say the programming for the freshmen is more about encouraging experiences, academic experiences that may not be present in their everyday classes, but not so much about making sure that everybody is eating well or attending classes, even though you say, hey, this is a good idea to do, but there's no enforcement, right? of Any of that.
So-
There's no enforcement in class. That was something I learned the third week of college, is that no one cares if you don't go to class. Yeah, everybody just nodded out there. And I've noticed that the advice that everyone gives about going to college is always go to class. Everyone says that. Even John Cage said, always go to class.
John Cage, the musician.
The composer.
So, but just for full disclosure, that was Dr. Nirmal Trivedi. He's not a freshman. He's the director of the GT 1000 freshman seminar program. And so I would agree with you, right? Because if I don't, we'll both look bad. GT 1000 really is designed to do those academic experiences. But I think what we're talking about is the housing side, right? What do they call it? What's the housing side where they kind of...
It's called housing.
No, but it's called something. I just had it there. Something experience. So freshman experience, residence life. Residence life is residence life. That would be unfortunate. Residence life is the entire umbrella program that does freshman experience. They are actually collaborating with us on sophomore living learning programs, the Think Big program, things like that. They're really trying to do the living part, not the academic part, right? The academic part is, I think, actually a very useful thing, because we work on the academic side. But I think there's a balance, and having been involved in the freshman experience, I can say this, that students vary between the people that have friends and make friends easily and have friends from high school that moved in there and they're their roommates and they already have stuff to do, to people that go once in a while and need a little guidance, to people that need a lot of guidance, to people that completely freak out freshman year, lock themselves in their dorm room and play Halo 4 until they flunk out of school. That's exactly how it was described to me by a PL.
It was Doom when I was a freshman, but it was basically the
and
same
now,
thing.
what is it now? League of Legends, World of Warcraft, something like that.
Someone in the audience
we're getting
just
a little
threw their
we're getting a
hands
little
up like,
gender
"I didn't
bias
touch it."
here. This is a guy thing too, isn't it? So, ladies, you don't. Okay, so
Mario Kart.
I know, but you don't look like a kind of person that's going to lock yourself in the dorm and play Mario Kart constantly.
All right, so let's talk about that. We're doing a lot of crowd work here, and everyone's getting a little uncomfortable. So let's talk about the freshman who locks themselves, him or herself, in their room.
Yes.
The withdrawn college student.
Well, sometimes it's just too much freedom, right?
Exactly.
You said yourself, you learned you don't have to go to class. GT 1000, by the way, is the only class I take attendance in. That's the only one.
Why do you take attendance in your GT 1000 class?
You want to know the real answer?
I do.
And it's not because I'm worried that, well, yeah, I am worried that freshmen won't come to class. But I'm also feel like that's the one class where the experience is actually relevant, right? So they should be in class listening to team leaders, and we have guest lectures and things, actually getting the experience and going back and forth. Whereas if you have a senior student who's so brilliant, they can read the notes and read the textbook and still do well, that's okay. I think that's perfectly fine. I put a lot of notes online. I put a lot of examples online. And if that's the learning mode that works for them and they've made it to a senior level by doing that, that's okay by me.
Aren't you trying to get away from that kind of class, though? Wouldn't your perfect class be one that the in-class experience was as important or more so than the notes?
Yes, but we're having difficulty reaching people.
Why?
I don't know. And let me share an example. with you.
Wait. Go ahead and theorize first, and then give me an example.
What do I just, my eyes have to roll back in my head to look like I'm thinking or something like that?
The steam coming off.
Well,
the
I'm
top
going to
will
go
make
back
people know that
to
you're
something we
thinking.
talked about a few weeks ago, and that was my colleague, Matthew Ralph. I'm teaching senior design, and most of what I'm doing is behind the scenes, administrative stuff, checking the project with the TAs, and putting out the handouts about what they should do. And that's not trivial because it's an open-ended project, and a lot of what we do is we meet with the students. But there's a lecture component, and studies have indicated that lectures are possibly the least effective way to engage people.
Well, if you broke it down, it makes sense. Like just talking at someone
Yeah.
for an hour. I mean, I've already drifted off like twice since we've been talking.
Yes, I think that's the mesmerizing effect of our bald heads. But so my colleague Matthew Ruff, I told you about this. Rather than going in and saying, today we're going to talk about heat exchanger network design for chemical plants. Any thoughts on that one? People are ready to stab themselves with an ice pick over that one. He came in and he said, I'm going to talk about a field that didn't exist 20 years ago, but now it exists because of something interesting in history. And he shows the price of oil over time. And admittedly, okay, we're talking about oil. These are chemical engineers. And he showed the price of oil spiking in 1973 because of the Israeli war. And the point is, okay, so I remember 1973, right? And you guys don't, and that's okay. You don't have to know the answer, right? Exactly. So, no, I mean, this was a headline. We watched this war, and and they had these wire-guided tank missiles, and it was very interesting. But so you guys weren't around, so he doesn't expect you to know the answer. Although someone said, and he has an interesting philosophy, and I've talked about this in the podcast before. He said, in my class, there's only two reasons why something happened: money or war. Which I think is an interesting simplification of the world, but it gets people thinking. So they were thinking, well, which one do you think this is? And somebody said war. He said, exactly. Which war? Somebody said World War II. And that's when he became bitter and cynical for the entire semester.
All right, now stop there.
Okay.
So what you're talking about is the narrative in what you're teaching, so that you're telling a story as opposed to giving dry facts, and people can engage with that.
Yeah, and making it relevant.
But you can write that down, and someone can read it. You don't have to be in class to hear the narrative either. So what's the?
But you do.
You
to
have
get the
such
give
a
and take-
wincing laugh when you
to
hear
get
that.
the give and take of someone going World War II. And of course we laughed at that. But
Which is nice, but what are you going to bring to class? What are you going to do to make someone feel like class is the most important part? And by class, I mean being in the room with their fellow students and the professor. How are you going to make that the most important part of the course? Because I know people coming into tech, they're all badass, right, academically. And they can read the book and they can ace a test, right, especially your tests.
are you saying my tests are easy?
That's not the only thing. So I'm sorry, that was a cheap laugh.
I'm
I don't
cheap.
know why. I
I'm
went
not
for it.
easy.
You've been doing all this crowd work. It's killing me. I'm used to podcasting while staring at your head.
He works in the library. Can you tell?
So how are you going to make the class experience pull a freshman in? GT 1000, there's that sort of, you have 1 hour a week and we do a particular thing and you can't get the assignment done unless you're there to hear what's going on, right? That's kind of the trick to get people into GT 1000.
Okay. And admittedly, this
You're
guy's
not
lecture,
convinced?
the only way you could do the homework is by going to the lecture. But the lecture wasn't just math on how to optimize heat exchanger networks. They were explaining that this field started in the mid-'70s because of the oil embargo that resulted from that war. And we used to just waste heat in a chemical plant. Now we realize if you've got a exhaust stream that's really, really hot, you can use that to preheat a cold stream. And the field was born. And let's face it, this is not like infotainment with Only in America, Larry the Cable Guy presents.
Anthony Bourdain describing heat transfer using a steak.
Well, that is pretty interesting. But, I mean, you can only make heat exchanger networks so interesting. That's what I'm saying. And I think he does as good a job as anyone, and still people are checking Facebook. And they check Facebook in my GT1000 class. Can I admit that to you, Nirmal? They do that. How do you get around that? Do you have thoughts on how to get around that? Okay, that's part of it.
What was the answer?
Interactive
What was
experiences, demos, direct learning. So, and in a sense, that's kind of what we're doing now, right? You have to have the lack of fear of ambiguity and uncertainty to go into class and not sure exactly what you're going to conclude. The basic principles are the same, but if you were to analyze something, and in engineering, what's nice is there isn't one answer. And there isn't one answer in literature, and there isn't one answer in language. I mean, architecture, there is not
There
one answer.
is one answer in literature.
No, and it's not that Moby Dick is a
Moby
religious
Dick is
allegory
exactly
either.
right.
So, for example, Wesley, you're in architecture, right? So when I was here my second year, we made a wiki, and the wiki was for collaborative learning. It was a wiki site for chemical engineers.
Don't pronounce it like that.
Why can't I say that? Do I need to say wiki?
Just say...
How do you pronounce wiki?
Now I don't know because you've said it so many times that way.
How does the crowd pronounce wiki?
Wiki.
Wiki?
Wiki.
Oh, because that's technically the Hawaiian Creole.
Like-
Wiki? Is that how you
Say it wiki,
I
like
say
wicker.
wiki. Wiki, brother. So in any case, what is it? So we made a site. It was very similar to a site in architecture for collaborative learning. Our site tanked after 2 years. Tanked. It was a waste of time. Your site in architecture, very similar, got lots of hits, lots of collaboration. It won an award. It was so active. Here's why.
He's shaking his head. He doesn't believe you.
No, and this may not even be online anymore. But some guys here did this site, and people traded ideas because they realized that you can say, well, I'm big into wrought iron fencing, and this is really good, and that fits this. To be honest, I don't even remember what it was, but it worked well because you guys are collaborative, and you see sharing designs and idea as something for the greater good. And so you talk about your ideas, and someone might take a version of your idea and mix it with their idea, and that's what they'll do. Chemical engineers, and this is not the way we should teach it, when we start as a freshman, by the way, so physics, chemistry, math, here's the problem number 2.3. You do it. The answer is -32, and that's what you do. Nobody collaborates on that because it's -32. You're given the answer.
We never
right.
asked her major.
No, but the major is irrelevant. I don't care if you're majoring in music or whatever. We just sort of give you problems. And it's not till the junior, senior year when we do the open-ended design stuff. My students are designing a corrosion inhibitor plant. They make chemicals that keep your pipelines from corroding and blowing apart like currently 2 oil pipelines are doing in this country. And people are like, oh, those pipelines are really safe. There's a lot of technology that goes into keeping pipelines safe. And we had 8 different groups, and we had probably 5 or 6 different basic approaches. And that's what makes it interesting. So the problem with freshmen, with the exception of Wesley's major, you guys are in the studio right from the beginning, aren't you?
Yeah.
So like, and is it an open-ended experience?
Yeah, I mean, you
Yeah.
give it a goal that you can
Right.
answer that.
And you guys take this the studio approach, right?
Yeah.
Right, and that maybe speaks to what you talked about before, Nirmal, the smaller classes, more interaction. You're on your own, but you have people that interact with you in the studio. And that's a very expensive way to teach, actually.
What's a one-on-one
Yeah.
between the teacher and the student?
It is. And I've got lectures with over 100 people in them, and you assign these things, and you can't always assign the kind of problem where you would have 20 different answers out of 100 people. All right, he's touching things again.
It's sad how insecure you are.
So can I make a segue here?
Yeah, hit
Can I
it.
talk about what I think the biggest problem with freshmen are? The fact that they're here and they clog up the cafeteria. No, see, so let's be honest. Here's what we say in the summer when there aren't a lot of students here. We're like, this place is really cool when there aren't so many students around. And it's usually just trying to eat, Sing Chow noodles at the Tin Drum, Asian fusion cuisine or something like that. Or you guys, there's just a lot of people when you go to the cafeteria.
The Starbucks is the best example.
Is it really packed when there's...
I mean, fall semester, who's experienced the Starbucks line at its peak, right?
I won't go. It's too long.
Yeah, right. I'm amazed at how long people will wait for a cup of overpriced coffee.
Yeah. So the single biggest problem, and you guys can correct me if you think I'm wrong, is I could explain it in terms of something called positioning theory from the educational pedagogy literature. Or I could do some performance art, right? So positioning theory, it's freshmen come in and they see themselves down here intellectually, socially.
Okay,
on
that's
many
the
levels.
right hand lower than the mic.
Lower than left hand. Left hand is the faculty.
Left hand's above the mic.
You see this as these all-knowing, omniscient, sage type folks.
I don't think that's true at all anymore.
Well, but they're very intimidated. Are you intimidated by faculty?
Nods all around.
So
Let's get the mic back out.
yeah.
What would make you less intimidated by faculty members? Just any,
Or even
anything.
why are you intimidated by faculty? Look at us. We're kind of strange. You can't be intimidated by us.
It probably just carries over from having like scary teachers in high school.
What makes a scary teacher?
Wait, first of all, let's
They're-
note we're throwing the high school teachers under the bus. Yes.
I don't know. Like they seem intimidating because they're not approachable. Like if you ask them a stupid question, they would treat you like you shouldn't have asked that,
Was there harshness in your classes? Is there sort of a get
No,
with the
actually, I'm
program?
really surprised. Like I have 2 classes right now, and I really like both of my teachers. They're really nice. One is a smaller class, and it's more interactive. So I've talked to my teacher a lot. But the other one is like a lecture hall, and even then, I still like my teacher because.
So if you have the right kind of teacher, they're not as intimidating, is what you're saying.
Or just maybe the way they teach. If they're.
This is good. I like where this is going.
You're making me nervous.
No, it's okay. So when you say
We're
the
trying
way
to
they
learn
teach,
from you.
what kind of ways of teaching are you thinking of?
The way they like present the material, more so, like if they can relate it back to you, if they can, let me see, if they're just teaching the material. But okay, one class I'm taking is History of Modern Industrial Design, which is just like different objects through history, and they're really cool. But I've started really enjoying that class because it'll be things I recognize, or she'll relate it back to things that I do recognize now, like, oh, this is the kind of technology you use for trash cans now, or something like that. And instead of her just listing out what each object is and leaving it at that, and like putting it on us to memorize the information, and just making it more interesting and trying to relate it back to the student, I guess.
You keep saying relating back to the student, but you're thinking of relating back to you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What has not related to you in your classes? What have you felt sort of distant from?
Nothing yet.
How about in high school?
Well, a lot of history classes felt really distant, I guess. Yeah.
Well, but it doesn't matter what the subject is, right? I mean, so
Actually, it sounds a little bit like it might. It's harder to make history seem present, right? I mean, you're talking about seeing an object and being able to connect it to, oh, I see the echoes of that in technology I use today, whereas probably I'm just going to guess that the Crimean War is hard for you to then relate to what's happening right now.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. Go ahead and pass the mic to the next person. We'll put everybody on the hot seat here. Do you find your professors intimidating?
So just a little background about myself. I'm going to my 3rd year now,
Mm-hmm.
and I am in the liberal arts school. So
You're an invader.
welcome.
Thank you
We're
for
glad
coming.
you're here.
This is awesome.
Thanks. Yeah. So that means that I am fortunate enough to have smaller classes, for the most part, at least within the liberal arts program classes. But I guess you could say that has made me feel more comfortable with my professors. So especially with my freshman year, my smallest class was actually 15 people, and that was a language class. My sophomore year, my smallest class was 6 people with the same professor. And I have been told, at least, that like senior design or your last senior class, like classes can be about that same size, or like you have a lot of interaction with your professors. And so that has kind of led me to feel very comfortable with professors, and they don't really seem intimidating anymore. They seem like normal people.
So you're saying class size, is that because you have one-on-one time with the professor, or because you have to relate to each other as people? I'm imagining a lecture hall. You don't have to talk to the professor ever. You could hide, and
Right.
maybe that actually makes you more insecure
Yeah,
with the professor?
definitely. A lecture halls are very easy to blend into, especially if you don't know the answer to the question. You don't want to raise your hand
Mm-hmm.
and contribute to the discussion. But especially in my smaller classes, you have no choice but to participate in a discussion, and especially if you have a professor who's willing and to direct the conversation and accept all of the answers,
Mhm.
good and bad, then it's more comfortable. So, yeah.
Right on. Keep it going.
All right, so I'm answering the same question.
Do you find professors intimidating, and how have you not found them intimidating?
Okay, so I'm going to be a 4th year, and I'm biochemistry, so I'm sciencey. But I found my professors to get less intimidating as I've gotten higher in my years.
That's very typical.
Yeah, I think it is a lot to do with the class sizes, because I know freshman year I walked in there and there's like 200 people in my calculus class, and I just felt like there was no way I could like meet my professor. And in high school, I never had to ask questions, so when I got here and had to start asking questions, I thought my professors were going to think I was dumb for asking the questions I had. And I actually didn't start going to office hours until this last year, when I had a professor who said, I was for one of my lab courses, and she said, come to class with like, if you come to my office hours with just a paragraph written, if you kind of know where you want to go with this lab report, but just barely have any of it done, I will help you. I will help you like get it going. I'll help your mind go to where you want it to go. And so because she made me feel like there's no stupid question I could ask her, I started going to her office hours, and that's something I'm going to continue doing. But I think it just takes that one professor to tell you that there aren't stupid questions, and that will help people go to office hours more. And that's really how I was intimidated, is I was afraid to ask questions.
In the big lecture halls, when there were so many students, was it that you didn't want to ask your questions in front of these other students, or did you feel like you wouldn't get the attention because there were so many of you?
Well, I wouldn't want to ask in front of all the other students, because so when I took calculus, I didn't take calculus in high school, so I didn't know what derivatives were, and everyone's sitting around like, oh yeah, derivatives, and I'm like, I'm not going to ask. I have no idea what they're talking about. So yeah, and I didn't want to go ask the professor because he just skimmed over it as well, and I felt like it was something I should have already known. I don't really. I think if I like threw my hand up, it depends on really on the professor. Like I know Dr. Greco, who teaches physics.
They put
Yeah.
Ed up to talk about student engagement all the time.
Yeah.
He's a rare breed.
Yeah, so like he does have like really large lecture halls. If you have a question, he'll answer it for you. But it really just depends on what type of professor and what kind of class they run.
So what's really scary here is at Georgia Tech, and this is particularly true in engineering. Science, not so much, because science, they have to teach the freshman classes. They have what's called a service load. But in engineering, usually your first class is your sophomore level year. Most of my colleagues have never taught a freshman in their life. And I taught I teach them through GT 1000, and we taught a similar a similar course for freshmen in chemical engineering. And what I learned is chemical engineering, or freshmen rather, are sort of the beginning of this process, that most students by the time they're a junior or a senior realize they can approach professors. They realize what you just pointed out, Kelly, the main advantage of approaching professors, which is you can go in and spend 5 minutes and get that question answered, and that will save you weeks and weeks later if you don't get the material up front. Freshmen are absolutely terrified. And this is a quote I sometimes use when I used to give a lecture to the Facet students called Your Professor, Human or Alien Spawn. I actually had someone on the course critique write when I taught this freshman course. And I would ask, does everyone understand that? You get it? It's okay. You'd pause. You do everything in the Teaching Tips for College Professor book that we all read, and you'd make sure they're comfortable. Then you'd move on. And they kept nodding their heads, and I realized they were lying through the entire semester. Someone actually wrote, you don't actually expect us to ask questions in front of our peers and admit we don't know the answer. And I'm like, yes, I do. And what I tell the Facet students is most of the class has the same question, right? So we go through things very, very rapidly sometimes. And this is why I try to avoid PowerPoint slides when I teach, because you just whip through these slides and you're done. And in fact, I tend to do some of my lectures much like this podcast. I'll have a problem that I'm going to do to illustrate things, and I'll derive the equation. And then you ask questions. Well, what if there is no friction? What if the fluid's not moving? And then you're crossing out terms and you're doing things, and you're trying to get them used to the fact that there's an exception to everything, right? I mean, you can take
You're
one
trying to
problem.
ask the questions that the students would ask? Is that
Well,
what you're doing?
but I'm letting them ask that as well. But still, most of my students say until they're a junior, senior, they all say this by the time. So I was just talking to my senior design students that I'm teaching this semester, and they're like, one of them said that Professor Julie Champion, who's next door to me in my department, was an excellent teacher, brilliant researcher, the nicest person on the planet. Her students bring her cookies. They like her so much, right? She's just a really nice person. I'm glad she's my neighbor, because there are a lot of tools that could be next to me that I would not prefer. And she said even she was intimidated until she got rid of that positioning thing and met her at a women in engineering luncheon or something like that. And then suddenly it was outside the classroom, and it was a little bit different. And I think that's actually a very important component, is to get outside of the classroom, where you're not being judged on your knowledge of chemical engineering or industrial design or biochemistry. And you see how wacky some of the people in biochemistry actually are.
I'm interested in this whole class size thing, because what I heard earlier was that it's less intimidating to ask a question with just a few people around than it is with a huge lecture hall. Whereas my experience was you vanish into a lecture hall. And so if you have to ask what's a derivative, maybe someone will make a noise, right? Because you get scoffers, but here's a great thing that all people should know. The person who scoffs sucks, and you're better than them. So, what's a derivative? What's that funny symbol? And someone in the back goes, "Ugh." It doesn't matter, right? You get that answer, and then you disappear back into the crowd. This is what my experience was. But it sounds like having people around you who are looking you in the eye when you ask the question, or who are able to sort of make it okay that you were asking a question. Is that, 6 people? Yeah, go for the mic. 6 people seems like a terrifying situation as opposed to 150 to me.
Well, I think the thing is, with the smaller lecture halls, usually we're all on the same page. Like if you have a smaller class, like they're usually the teacher teaches to only those 6 people, so he knows or she knows where those people are, and so they're basically on the same page. When you get the larger lecture halls, they'll have people all over the spectrum.
Wildly different levels of understanding.
Right.
I see. So the smaller groups, you kind of bring the person who has the least understanding up.
Right, and
Right.
and there's more conversation. I had a PChem class my last year, and there were maybe 20 of us or 30 of us or something, but it was more of an engaging conversation. Let's work a problem on the board and have everyone there with it. And so I actually stuck with PChem even though I don't know anything about PChem. So it was a completely different experience. So.
I think there's a bit of social anxiety to that. You know, you might come into college as a freshman and you might not know that many people. You might know a few people here, but you're in a lecture room full of 150 people. And so you have that fear of just, if I'm going to ask this question and I say the wrong thing, now I have 150 people hating me as opposed to 6 who, like Kelly said, might be on the same page.
Do you think that there's an actual hate going on?
There's not, but it's all in your head, you know?
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Aside from, smaller classes, more engaged faculty, those are important things that get into interesting policy discussions that Nirmal claim I got into trouble on 2 podcasts ago by talking about, research focus versus teaching focus. But I think with regard to the freshmen, I think that's exactly it. It's in your head. It's social anxiety. You're terrified. And for me, my personal experience is until you've sat down with a faculty one-on-one outside the class, and maybe it's at a women in engineering luncheon, or maybe it's you go to office hours and you pique their interest with some question you have, and they not only tell you about the problem that you're talking about, they talk about how back in '05 we looked at that same thing. Okay, that tells you how old I am if I have professors that are that old. And they sit you down for 30 minutes or an hour and talk to you about similar research they did and what they thought and how this is really cool and this is really great. And they get all excited. And you realize they're people too. You can talk to them. They will talk to you. They're not just sitting there waiting to put a funny colored check mark next to your name because you asked some question in class.
What is a funny color?
I don't know. I just, if you got one of those pens with the 6 things like the purple. I mean, when you co-teach senior design, I always mark in green, my colleague Joe marks in red, and my friend Matthew Ralph marks in light blue or purple. So he's the funny color, which is okay. I've got nothing against light blue or purple. I just get off my case. He does this in all our podcasts. He's just Mr. Devil's Advocate giving you a hard time. So has anyone had that experience where they actually had this interaction with the faculty that they didn't expect them to be nice and talk to you about stuff and get excited about things?
I got
Okay.
one nod.
So our
in
liberal
there,
arts
yeah.
person, we got a nod. Okay.
Is there any detail to that you could share with us?
Well, it brings in another program, I guess.
Go for it.
Yeah, let's hear
Their
about it.
Social hovery program. But Kelly and I were actually in the Think Big program. So we met professors there also who were within the liberal arts school. And there was Dr. what's his last name? Dr. Adams? Doug Adams, is it? No, Fleming. Oh, man.
Oh, yeah, Fleming.
Yeah.
Teaches history here,
yes, he
right?
teaches history.
Actually taught history at Caltech, so he's well prepared for
Yeah.
teaching at Georgia Tech. Totally cool guy, Doug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's just his nature, but meeting him in that dimension rather than in the classroom, it was really cool to see, and hold conversations that had absolutely nothing to do with tech or school. You see that teachers are people too.
Does that take
Okay.
away from their authority on the class at all? Does that make you feel kind of like maybe they know less when they're humanized?
Because some of my colleagues will say familiarity breeds contempt, and they don't like that.
No, I don't think so. I think it's definitely harder because if there is a teacher who sits back and doesn't really know their students, it's a lot easier to give out those failing grades or the D's and the C's.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're fair and just about it, I don't see how there is a problem with that. Because I know I've had friends who have had class with Dr. Fleming, and they say he's, if you can click into teacher mode, it's okay.
Right.
Mhm. And we do. I've had colleagues who write that as soon as they post their final grades, they like leave for the rest of the afternoon because they don't want anyone to come into their office. And I'm like, come on in. You ought to be able to discuss that grade with them and tell them why. And believe it or not, some of it's just plain the social anxiety that Wesley was talking about before. That I learned this from my former school associate chair, that you come in and you just tanked. You didn't do well. You fell off the end of the distribution and you got a failing grade and you're not happy about that. And sometimes students just want to come in and find out, I mean, they just want to vent. And you nod your head and say, yeah, that's tough. It's tough. The classes are tough. And you're very sympathetic, and you say, I can't really change the grade because that wouldn't be fair to your fellow students. And then you try to point out what could you have done differently. And to be honest, most of the students that fall off the edge, it's very rare that these are not people that are trying, right? If you're trying, you usually do well. And that's another myth I should dispel. We don't like to give D's and F's. I know people think we do. They're like, yeah, I'm going to give that guy an F. And you feel better and you go home and you have a beer and you're like, yeah, no. But so I'm thinking of the line from Judge Smales in Caddyshack. Do you guys even remember that film? It's just, okay, so I'm going to look to the one guy that remembers this film. He goes, Danny, I've sent boys to the gas chamber younger than you. Didn't want to. Felt I owed it to them. And we're like, we didn't want to give you a D or an F. But, and I don't know what folks in, literature, media, and is it communication?
Literature, media, and
culture?
and communication now.
Is it communication?
I can't
So
even
they changed
remember.
the media for the culture.
They took LCC and made it LMC.
And I don't know what
now
they
I'm
do,
lost.
but I think, would you want this guy at a nuclear plant or a chemical plant 10 miles from your house? That's the judgment. And if I'm like, no, they're getting D or an F. It's pretty simple. So you owe society that much. And to be honest, even if you do literature, if you write copy, if you have a degree in English, that annoys me more than the blowing up nuclear plant, frankly, because if I get nuked in the plant, I'm gone. I don't even notice it. But if I have a misused gerund or something like that drives me crazy, no, okay. But that's...
You don't even know what you're talking about now, do you?
Yeah, just bad logic, bad communication, bad copy. I mean, bad copy that drives me nuts when my students do that in a report. So, so we don't actually want to do that. And now I've wandered off, and I don't even remember what the original point was. This happens a lot.
By a show of hands, the students, who has cried or had a emotional response?
Oh, you can't ask people.
Stop it, to a grade. Yeah.
Not in front of my professor, though.
Everybody's got... No. Just, I think that's a big...
Sometimes it's rage.
That's why we have to make up these stories about how D's and F's are, what a professor wants to do, because it feels so awful, right? It never just feels like, here's an assessment of your ability to understand what was in the class, right? It feels like, no, never again, right? And I think that the grades have to be explained, right?
If you can't defend your grade, then you're not a good teacher.
Yeah. Okay, that was a different thing than I was talking about.
Uh-oh.
When you start the class, you have to say, here's what I'm going to assess you on. Here's how I'm going to give you a grade, and here's what those grades mean, as opposed to the sort of, you fail if you do these things, so the F, failure, as opposed to F, you need to try again, right? Go ahead.
This is just making me think of like the curves here at Georgia Tech, and I think it's unlike
legendary curves.
Yeah, I just still don't understand the point of making someone fail the entire semester and worry and cry and just fraught with just so distraught, and then at the end they wind up with an A. I don't understand the point of having curves like that.
So explain the curves. I thought that was that workout place where a lot of people go. Okay, sorry.
No, so I know, so my, I took biochemistry 2 this last semester, and I guess I'll just talk about my grades if that's okay. So to get a B in the class, you only needed 60%.
Oh,
out of 100.
Okay.
A 60 was a B.
Which is a 20-point curve.
So first let me address one thing about the curves. I think curves are kind of bad in general, and I think fewer people use curves than you actually think. So curve in the sense of something relative to the number of people that they're going to give 10% Fs and they're going to give 20%.
No,
Ds.
it's not even. So
Yeah.
we went into the semester on the syllabus, and he said, as long as the class does as all my other classes have done, a 60 will be a B. So what's the point of making the class so hard? Why can't an 80 be a B?
Oh,
Why are
okay.
his why
I
are
think
tests like
I
that?
think I have
stuff
an
like
answer.
that.
Well,
to that
wait.
one.
We need to clarify very quickly what you two were just talking
Oh,
about.
right. So
You were
so
saying
I want to
a
clarify
bell curve
another thing.
distribution of
Yeah.
A's, F's, B's,
Yeah,
C's,
it
and D's.
is wrong, right? Your
Right.
goal should be for everyone to get an A.
But
That's
that is
what your
not
goal.
what people talk about when they talk about the curve at
Okay.
Georgia Tech. They talk about this extraordinary moment
Yeah,
at the end of class when suddenly your points rise
okay.
into a grade that you...
But do they tell you up front that a 60 is a B?
Yeah, for this class they did, and from other classes it's sometimes been like, oh, everyone's doing really bad, so let's just.
Oh, okay. So, but I think we're talking about something different, right? And that is that if you give the impression that you're grading on a 90, 80, 70 scale, and people are bombing, and it's just horrible, and then at the end you pull the switcheroo, there is no point to that. But if you tell people that a 60 is a B, so as you're getting your assignments back, you know exactly where you're going, right? So you can see, oh, I'm getting a B, I'm getting an A, I'm getting a C, or if I do well in the final, I can up it by 1 grade.
Perhaps
what
it's
you're
a
just
class
saying
where
is
60%
why is
understanding-
only 60% correct on the test acceptable? Why do you make the test
Right.
so
Right.
hard?
Yeah.
I'm going to throw the Europeans under the bus on this one.
That's a big bus.
So have you done any study abroad?
No, I can't afford it.
That's what I said when I was a kid
Blunt.
too. I thought study abroad was for rich, spoiled kids. when I
Well,
was a student
we
as
make
well.
enough money to where we can't get any help, but we don't make enough money to send me to study
Yeah,
abroad,
I'm there
so,
too. I
yeah.
understand what you're saying. I'm going to try to help my daughter because I saw how valuable that experience is. And what you learn is, and let me take Oxford and Cambridge and Imperial College and University of College London, and that's a tradition very similar to our academic one, but there are similar ones in other European countries. When I grade with my European colleagues, their grading scale is 50, 60, 70 for a CBA. They always want to leave a little extra room for the next Isaac Newton at the top. And you're right, it is it's depressing to see that. But just realize that they're trying to challenge you and push you as hard as you can and raise the bar as high as they can. So they want you to struggle with these things. And then in the end, if the distribution is okay, if they're giving out a fair number of A's and B's and C's and you know, people that worked hard and learned the material, I think that's just trying to push people. And it has to do with something that someone alluded to before, and that is you learn more from challenges, and I'm even going to reword that. You learn more from failures than you do for anything else. And that is so easy for the old bald guy to say. And I've heard lectures from Nobel laureates saying, well, we failed at this. And I'm like, yeah, that's easy for you to say, pal. You know, you won the Nobel Prize and you're rich and famous and things like that. But it's true. But you guys, when you're a freshman, you're just not ready. Here, I'm going to make you fail 20 different ways, and that's the best way to learn. And if you do that and learn from it, I'm going to give you a good grade. Nobody wants to hear that.
I think that's like the biggest
Yeah.
shock as a freshman is like
Yeah.
coming out of high school, we're all the top, so we're all, you know,
Yeah,
easy
no, right.
gliding
You
through.
have not failed. I
Right.
have failed in so many ways, in so many modes, and Charlie can attest to that. Just
I'm failing right now.
we are, in fact, and that's okay. So we embrace failure. Failure is okay. This was an experiment for us. We're going to try this. We're going to do a few more. That probably could have turned out more focused, but we're willing to try that sort of thing. But you're right.
Speaking of it being an experiment,
Yeah, I know we're getting near the end.
yeah, we should do questions now.
Stop poking me. All right. So now that I've talked about failure, you want to take some question?
Yeah, if we can do, we'll go around the room, and if anybody's got a question, any topic, any question, and
Kind of related to freshmen.
and we're gonna find one to end the podcast on. It'll be great. Yeah, right. So, hand it to the person who's smiling.
Our true freshmen.
Pete, while someone tries to come up with a question, just yell when you've got a question. So how do you feel about this live taping thing? First off, there's no tape.
Right, but I think we would have had more people if the brownies weren't so stale. Did anyone try the brownies? They're kind of stale. A little dry.
Could have used some milk.
Yeah, that's
Could use some milk or maybe some
that's my
Malice
fault. We'll get
Toclus.
newer pastries next time. No, we did reach out to as many of the 250 freshmen here for the taping, so we appreciate you coming. Did you see any flyers like in Smith Hall or any of those places?
No. Katie, who's a PL on the floor below me.
Katie Eckert?
Yeah, she
Yes.
told me about it. And I was walking through Clough and I remembered.
Yeah,
Here.
I was told about Katie by my daughter, Katie's also her PL, and what was it? She said, "Oh, Katie remembers you. I think I did what are these dinners we do over there? Hot Topic dinner." And so Katie agreed to put up a dozen flyers, and I gave the flyers to my daughter, and my daughter looked like I just stabbed her with a pen in the shoulder or something. She goes, "Oh no, you're not going to do some podcast and embarrass me." Well, there you go.
I can feel her mortification right now, knowing that you're talking about her.
But this is how you start, right? People say that when you do a radio show, and both Charlie and I do a radio show on WREK.
Two different radio shows.
Because I don't think we could stand each other 2 times a week. For every 1,000 listeners, you get someone who calls up once in a while. So,
or sends an email,
yeah,
which is always
like
nice.
That. So by that count, we have several thousand.
You want to do
listeners.
some plugs, and we'll see if they've got questions.
Does anyone have a question yet?
Okay, from the
Oh.
perspective of
From the
a
what
teacher,
perspective?
From a perspective of a teacher.
Okay.
How should students come into class? Like, I know that I should probably walk into each of my classes hoping to learn as much as I can, but like when you do fail, what would you recommend? Like how to bounce back, basically?
That's awesome.
So how should you come into class? You should come into class actually well rested. That would be really good.
It's hard to do though.
Because people do the bob and weave thing with their heads going up and down. And, so I'm going to say something I can't deny it now because it's a matter of public record and it'll be recorded soon. Some lectures are boring. So I'm not so sure to what to do about that. But the ones that are more engaging.
Yeah, and when you say fail, are you like talking literally fail an assignment or a test? Or are you talking about
or
just
if you're
not
not
getting
accomplishing like what you want, if you're not getting what you want from the class?
right?
Mm-hmm.
So a way that you can go into a class is simply hungry, right? And I don't mean hungry like you want to eat something. I mean go into class wanting to do better. Go into class wanting to find something out. Go into class wanting to pull something out of your professor. Instead of expecting to be delivered to, your degree, instead of expecting to be given information that you'll then, turn into some kind of education, your education is happening at the moment that you're engaging with your professor. And the harder you go at them, the better, right? We talked about the rules, the suggested rules for teachers
Right.
and students. And one of the big ones is pull everything you can out of your professors and pull everything out of your fellow students too, right? You all should metaphorically be a pack of wild dogs taking everything away from the professor. Metaphorically taking everything you can away from the professor at that moment. No professor should ever end a class not really remembering what they talked about. When you drive home sometimes and you kind of drift and suddenly you're home, you're like, I hope I didn't kill anybody, right? You can give a lecture like that if you've given
That
it
comes
over
from a strange
and
period
over
when
again.
Charlie was a student.
And you want to stop. You want to stop whoever's teaching you from going by memory, going by the book, going by rote.
And so the single most popular question you can ask is why? Because we're up there and we're lecturing, we just do things, we drive things, we write things down, and we're always talking like Stewie from Family Guy. Well, of course, Moby Dick is a religious allegory. So
It's not. We know it's
this
not.
is an inside joke for us. So the point, and you just accept it. I was taught that in high school, that it's a religious allegory, and you're just like, well, that's what we do. And you're following along. Well, that step here, I have no idea what that was. Raise your hand and say, well, why does the pressure drop disappear? Or why is Moby Dick a religious allegory? Or something like that. And that's the interesting organic exploration type question. And if you actually have a teacher that says, well, just because it is, or it's not important, you don't need to know that.
Then headbutt them.
Metaphorically.
Metaphorically.
It's just like having a doctor saying, why do I need the MRI? Well, it's just, you just need it. You change doctors. That's what you should do. And in fact, those are the questions we really like. And sometimes the answer is, I'm not sure. Let me get back to you on that.
I think we got
And that's
another
okay.
question out there.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I just want to reiterate that I think the best way to bounce back is to step back and think about what you're being taught and why it matters. What's the big picture? What's at stake in what's being taught? And your teacher should be able to explain that.
And that's what we're trying to get you to learn and test you on. Whereas you guys see a bunch of formulas that you plug things into. And it's not that. It really is, because then we give you that, even in engineering, we give you that essay question at the end. And actually, I don't care if the answer's wrong. I really don't. Because, that was a nice try, but you didn't learn this in a PhD level course that you're going to learn later. But we want to see the argument. We want to see the logic. We want to see that you understand the basics of it. Because here's the killer. This is what you're going to hear from your friends that have jobs. You're going to say, yeah, did you ever do what is it? The such and such correlation to figure out overall heat transfer coefficients in a tube shell heat exchange or something? No, they don't do that, right? We teach you all these formulas, and we're obsessed with formulas. The formula is just a vehicle to get you to think about it. And the good question is, you have this formula. What if this went to zero? What if this went to infinity? What if you neglected this thing? And just think about it. Real engineers don't do fancy equations to cost a piece of equipment. They pick up the phone and call the guy who designed it last year for a similar plan, and they get this. They do more qualitative, seat-of-the-pants kind of things. And to be honest, we don't always test you on that sort of thing. And if we're doing our job, we're trying to test you on that. You plugging the number in a formula is just a way to set that up so you can make some sort of semi-quantitative judgment. But yeah, people would I describe high school like shampoo. If you look on the back of the shampoo bottle,
This is
what
we're
does
going
it
to end
say?
the podcast on this.
Right, and of course, Charlie and I know very little about shampoo. It says lather, rinse, repeat. And a lot of high school, not the good high school teachers, and probably everyone had at least one or more good high school teacher. Mine was a chemistry teacher who blew stuff up in the classroom a lot. It's kind of like memorize, regurgitate, repeat. Too many of our students will start with that in the freshman year and carry it through to the senior year, and if you do, it's going to kill you. You need to maybe think beyond that and think about, why you're learning it.
Almost had it nailed. Thanks for listening to Consilience with Pete and Charlie, our first attempt at a live taping. Pete, do you have anything to say before the guitar kicks in?
We'll make brownies that are less stale next time.
Okay. It'll be up on Wednesday.
When does the guitar kick in?
Hopefully when that applause ends.
Okay.
Wow. This is... Hey!
Did you get any usable video whatsoever?
We'll figure it out.
Okay.
Figure it out.
Okay.
Figure it out.
Okay.
Figure it out.
Okay.
Figure it out.
Okay.